Welcome to the Thinking About Thinking show. It's Friday, live on GMAP TV and syndicated elsewhere. This is our 4th episode. Time flies. This is the show that has more questions than answers, truth in advertising. And our guest today is Georgia Umano, who is the author of a new novel called Terriers in the Jungle, and it is published by Atmosphere Press, recently released, and it has won 3 book awards already this year. Amazing. Our topic with Georgia is going to be all about animals, and in particular, animal consciousness. Do animals have consciousness? Animal rights. Do animals have rights? And animal welfare. What can we do? What are our responsibilities as stewards, as guardians, as citizens of the earth? And Georgia has a lot to say about that, and indeed in her book. Georgia is a vegan animal activist who has organized, spoken, and conducted animal causes, led animal causes in the United States, Italy, and Kenya, especially in the fields of elephant and wildlife conservation and canine companions. Georgia is a SAG-AFTRA actress and has been seen on film, TV, and in theater. She has performed around the country in as a stand-up comedian and works as a feature journalist. She is a commissioned adult education teacher and a children's nature docent. She created, produced, and co-hosted with her dog, the YouTube series, The Georgia and Marcello Show. And please watch that after this one, even uh, even though it may be high in entertainment value. She holds an MA degree in educational theater from New York University and a BA degree in English literature from Lemoyne College. Terriers in the Jungle is her first novel, just as I say, recently released from Atmosphere Press. And in this novel, Roxy and Romeo, small and charming street dogs, get adopted by an animal conservationist. The two adore each other, their home, and their mom, Kate. But Kate decides that the family must move to Kenya to help save endangered elephants. The dogs must learn how to survive in the midst of wildlife, dangerous people and circumstances, and we experience their journey in their own words. Now, she's going to have to tell us about that. And they adapt and grow into intrepid adventurers, again, in East Africa. The story is inspired by real events. So we're going to have a stimulating discussion with Georgia. She's going to pop in here any moment now. There she is. Welcome, Georgia.
Hi, thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
We can hear you loud and clear. And
Great.
where are you sitting physically in the world right now?
I'm sitting in my office in Santa Monica, California.
In Santa Monica, Los Angeles. Know it well. Um, and I read your book. I'll confess, and I was fascinated by a number of things. But the thing that really intrigued me the most, and I think that is perhaps the most remarkable, is your claim that the dogs wrote this book. What can you
Yes,
tell us about that? How did the dogs write the book?
I'm very close with my dogs. They're like my best friends, and I'm with them 24/7. And I've seen them and known them since the time that they got rescued by me um, from bad circumstances. And I watched them change, and I've watched every little nuance, and I've seen their relationship evolve. So I feel that I know them intimately and I know what they would say if they could speak English.
Well, one of the things that struck me reading it, and indeed, you've got the dogs as narrators and they trade off. Sometimes Romeo is expressing himself, other times Roxy is commenting and teasing him. And one of the things that occurred to me is, I've seen movies and read books that are supposedly narrated by dogs, but I really did feel among all those experiences that none of them really got as close as you have to being really inside what a dog might be thinking. And again, the fictional characters, these dogs in movies, they talk like adults, and uh, and it was remarkable the way these dogs interact with each other, the way they tease each other. And the psychiatrist or the psychologist will tell us, okay, well, neurologically, a dog is about got the brain power of a 2-year-old. Well, I never met a 2-year-old that was as clever as these dogs. So you're to be commended for, I guess what I would say is being in touch with these creatures, these
Oh,
animals.
thank
And
you.
what amazes you about your life with them? And indeed, you actually physically took them to Africa. I mean, that was the real event that inspired this. Tell us about that process and that trip.
Well, it's not easy traveling that far with dogs,
I imagine
or
not.
any animal. Especially, I mean, I happen to have dogs. They're man's best friend, right? But only in certain circumstances because we're not allowed to bring them to a lot of places with us. If they're our best friend, we want them to be with us, right? But They're not allowed. But even when I was able to train them as service dogs, and they are licensed service dogs, so legally they are allowed to get on the airplane as a service dog in the United States.
In the United, yes,
And even
Americans with
then,
Disability Act.
there's a lot of scrutiny about it, and they make it difficult. Even if you have all your papers in order, all the shots you need, all the certificates you need, they still act like they're doing you a big favor to let you do this sometimes. And we had a few times where it was touch and go whether they were going to let him on the plane, even though I had gone through all this process. And then once we got to overseas, it was more and different problems with the dogs. Because, in many countries, especially where we were in Kenya, and I'm sure other African countries and most countries, they do not consider dogs to be as important as people. And so they take advantage of you. If you have a dog, they want to charge you extra for this and extra for that. And they want to not let you do this and not let you stay here. And it was a lot of work as far as that goes, as far as just the legalities and the day-to-day, making sure that they had everything they need. They had gotten so many shots before they left, but yet they were forced to get more and more shots while they were there, which is not necessarily great for them, but there's more diseases over there. So, it wasn't easy. That's all I'll say. It wasn't easy, but I wouldn't go without them.
Well, how are about the cultural differences? Kenya is an emerging economy, and they have very different uh, social structures. How are dogs regarded and treated in Kenya as compared to your experience here in the United
Well,
States?
okay, there's many fewer dogs that are considered to be household pets over there. Usually the dogs are mainly considered to be security for the house, the building, and they stay outside almost all the time, and they get scraps to eat, and they're not brought inside most of the time. Luckily, it's warm over there most of the time. Unlike, unfortunately, even in the United States, there's people who leave their dogs outside all the time, even in the cold, and they tie them up, and that's very cruel, but it still goes on. But in Kenya, first of all, there aren't very many small dogs that we knew of, and so they were considered to be somewhat of a novelty. And so, on the one hand, when we were in the city, people would stop and say, "Oh, are they for sale? Are you selling their children? Can we buy these? What do you want?" And I say, "No, no, they're just pets." And they said, "You mean you're just walking them for pets?" Yes. And then when we got to the rural areas where we lived, it was even more so. It's like, oh, they were so amused and astounded by them that they would say, "Give me one. Let me have one, because you have two. What do you need two for?" So, there was that kind of attitudes that were abundant. Um, and there was dog theft. So, knowing that the dogs were considered to be somewhat of a prize in a way, we had to be extremely careful and wouldn't leave them with anybody. And it limited our travel and things we could do.
Well, let's back up a minute. What obvious question? What took you to Kenya? You were living in Los Angeles. You picked up stakes and you just took off. I mean, did you expect to come back? Did you expect to do there?
Well, I'm a big elephant advocate, and we had been to Kenya about 6 times already as tourists, and we had at that time, we didn't bring the dogs. They stayed home with a really nice dog sitter who stayed in our house, and he treated them very well the way we do. But I'm a very much feel connected to elephants, and I wanted to be around them more. I felt like I was always learning. I had gotten to know and written about many conservationists, and especially in Kenya, and it was all so fascinating to me. And the last time we were there in 2017, I just felt like, oh, I really would like to stay here and see what I can do, because I want to be close to these animals, and the country is so beautiful, and the people were always so nice to us when we were tourists, and it just seemed like it would be a really wonderful thing to do. Also, when I was in college, I always thought it would be nice to join the Peace Corps, and I never had a chance. So this was kind of like building our own little Peace Corps, go over there, and I wanted to see how I could help elephants. And because we didn't know how long we were going to stay, I had to bring my dogs. I wasn't going to leave them behind. They are my best friends.
Well, what was involved in, were you going over there as a volunteer, as an employee, were you sent on a mission? What was the logistics involved in actually settling in and getting down to some significant work?
Well, I didn't have a specific work in mind. I wanted to be near the elephants. That's all I knew. And I was hoping maybe I could get a job at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, who I've been supporting for many years. And I have adopted baby elephants there. But that wasn't possible at the time. And so I had also interviewed many conservationists. So they were all trying to help me find a place where I could be and help. But at the time, the government did not want to give out work permits, especially in conservation, in the field of conservation. I guess, they are trying to make it more of many of their big conservation groups were started by white people, and they wanted it to be more native people, natural people, not just the white one. There are white people that live there, but I mean, I understood that, and also the government is a little, severe sometimes in its decisions. But when we first arrived there, I knew some friends there because we had been there several times, and I met people, and a friend invited me to meet her teacher, and her teacher ran a rescue group for young women who were raped, and they had nowhere to go, and they had babies, and they were very poor. So he was telling me about this, and I said, well, and he said, the girls never go back to school once they get pregnant. And I thought, wow, what a terrible loss of woman power, you know. So he said,
Yes.
"What it is?" And and then I found out all these girls are from the rural areas, and that's where they actually have the most problems with elephants, is in Kenya, not as in other countries in Africa. I have to give Kenya kudos, because they're the only one that does not allow trophy hunting, and they have pretty much done a great job against poaching. Not that it doesn't ever exist, but compared to the rest of Africa, it's pretty good. And so I forgot what was the question again. They
Well, you were talking about the Sheldrick Trust, and perhaps you can explain a little bit more how you were involved with that and what they do. I mean, that
Right. Well,
I think
the
that
Sheldrick
initially
Trust. Oh,
attracted you
yeah,
to
and
going
then the
there.
school. Right. Okay. I wanted to be involved with them because they're the largest elephant rescuers and conservationists in the world, and they rescue baby elephants mostly, but they also help elephants that have been speared. They have mobile vet units, but they're mostly known for rescuing baby elephants when their mother is killed in a drought, is poached, or any other thing happens. They take the babies, and over years, they have figured out how to take care of these babies in a really good way. They know what kind of milk formula they feed the milk every 2 or 3 hours. And then they have the other babies come around. It's so beautiful. The other baby elephants come and welcome them and help them put their trunks on them. With the new baby is always sad and frightened. And so eventually they grow up in their nursery for a couple of years right in the Nairobi National Park. So every day they go out foraging. They learn how to forage as though their parents were there teaching them. They teach each other, and they have caretakers. And then when they get to be around three-ish, they take them further into the wild in the middle of the Tsavo National Park, and they have other outposts there. And in those outposts, the elephants slowly integrate with the wild elephants, and they still have the caretakers, but not as much. They still have the milk, but not as much. So slowly they become wild, and they just go off with the wild elephants, or they form their own herd and they start little herds and go out. And then the most beautiful thing is they've had over 100 of these elephants who they rescued from a tiny baby go to the wild, become mothers, have babies, and then they always bring their babies back to show the caretakers. And that's so sweet. I just
I
think
believe we
it's,
have a video clip we can run that you actually took at Sheldrick. If our engineer can punch it in, we'll 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 have a look firsthand at what's going on inside the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. And as you say, that is actually in the national park that is now. What is the proximity of that park to Nairobi?
it's in Nairobi. Nairobi National Park is the only national park in the world that's in the middle of a big city. And it's
Oh,
it's right there uh, in Nairobi, on one of the areas of Nairobi. It's surrounded, by. So they have to have, of course, it's a big, big, big area. A lot of wild animals there, but sometimes one gets out, but usually they have it pretty under control.
well, that's amazing. I remember reading something about the controversy of that they were building or rebuilding a railroad through there. It was a
Yes,
big
they did
controversy.
that. They made it was on spikes, so it's up high, but it still
Hmm.
interfered with the wildlife. The wildlife people were not happy about that and tried to change it, but it's the worldwide problem is humans and wildlife, that there's too many humans and they're squeezing out the wildlife in so many ways.
I see. Well, it could be we can't put our hands on that clip.
Oh,
If it pops
okay.
in,
Maybe
if
another
it
time.
pops
No,
in,
you
that'll
would
be a
love to
bonus.
the baby elephants running. I think you had one with the baby elephants running
Oh
when they're
yeah, no,
coming back.
it was feeding time, and their
Yeah, feeding.
handlers
They're
were.
running back to get their bottles. It was
That's
very
right.
cute.
Their
Well,
bottles
I
of
hope you
milk
get to see
and
it. Or if you go to their website, Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, they have many, many pictures and videos, and also they're on Facebook. And I highly recommend to anybody who loves elephants, or even if you're just curious, and you'll get some really heartwarming stories and pictures, and maybe you'll fall in love like I did.
and you can adopt these elephants, right? What's involved in
Adopt them
adopting
from
an elephant?
anywhere around the world. Yes, I think it's about $50 a year. And that combined with all the other people, because it's very, very expensive to keep an elephant, if you can imagine. I mean, besides all the medical things they have to make sure of, and then they eat a lot. And the transport when they take them out to the country. But like I said, the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust also does mobile veterinary work. They also do they go in the field and they take wires out. People try to trap wild animals, so they're always pulling those out, and they're starting new places, oases for elephants. They're really wonderful as far as all the things that they're doing for elephants and other wildlife. But
And
anyway,
I believe
back to
that
my
you'd
story
explain,
for a minute.
I'm sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
I
You had a
believe you'd
question?
explain that these caretakers are with them all the time.
Yes, they have, but they found that if one is with them all the time, they get too attached. They're like their mother. So they switch.
Mm,
They sleep with them at night, but they can't keep the same person there every night. So they switch around. So they get used to all the caretakers and they don't get overly attached to one.
I see, I see. Well, now,
Yeah.
ho when in taking your dogs there to Kenya, and you had, you had this, I guess it was a teaching position with these unwed mothers, um, how
Yes,
did
I
your
was able to.
that's a big part of the story is how did your dogs interact with the wildlife and the new experiences that they encountered? Because obviously it was not Los Angeles.
Right. Well, they had many encounters with animals. I mean, I didn't bring them with me to the school. My husband was taking care of them then, and just when I went to the classes, but they interacted because the place we lived was a monkey haven. There were three different kinds of monkeys there. One, a beautiful endangered colobus monkey, beautiful long black and white hair, a long white tail, and kind of white epaulets on this black, really gorgeous. And there were three different kind of monkeys there all the time, and so they had many experiences with. They would even come into our apartment, so the dogs would go nuts chasing them out of the apartment. And then outside, when we were in Nairobi for a few months too, the monkeys there were not as friendly, I think, because there was more. We were living on the edge of a forest, and I think they still felt it was their land. So they were, and the people were not as
I'm
friendly.
sure it
When we went
was.
to the rural area, people just accepted the monkeys as part of the village, so everything was a lot more copacetic. Um, so they were chasing the monkeys out of the house. They were chasing the monkeys everywhere. And then also, one of my dogs was running on the beach there, and she ran smack into a camel. They had some camels there that were for the tourists, and he was lying there, and it was like all of a sudden, she's small. She's only 13 pounds, and here's this huge camel, and his mouth is right next to her. And luckily, there was a young man there who took care of them, and he says, "Oh, that's Obama." They called the camel Obama, and they said, "He's friendly. Don't worry. You don't
Very
have to
popular
worry about."
president in Kenya, yes.
They love Obama over there. Love him. Well, because his heritage is from
Oh,
Kenya.
yes. Oh,
Half of his
yes.
heritage. Anyway. So
So
yeah. So anyway, the camel, and then and they met an elephant. That was like an amazing experience for them and for me. And they had so many adventures, and that's what got me to write the book, because I saw them having these experiences and their reactions, and it was just amazing. So I just started writing it down, and then it eventually grew into a book.
an award-winning book, we might say. Yes.
Thank you. Yes,
Well, what
just
were you
this week,
doing?
2 awards this week.
What were you doing? Tell us more about what you were doing with in your actual uh, job with the unwed mothers and the orphanage.
Yes. I found out that the girls didn't know much about nature. And it's very ironic, because here we are, Americans, and people from all over the world go to Africa to see the beautiful nature and the wildlife. And these girls, they didn't even know the names of the monkeys that were all around them in this village. And so I found it very fun for me to teach them I was able to scrounge up a bunch of nature films, and I was showing them nature films. I would take them on field trips. We did beach cleaning. We learned about the turtles who were nesting there. There was a monkey conservation area. We went there several times, and then a couple of the girls were volunteering there every week after a while. I took the big thing for me was that they had never seen an elephant, even though, like I said, that's why these people in the rural areas who'd never seen an elephant, when they see one, it's pretty scary to them. And that's why they have the poison arrows and everything. So I was able to raise some money and take them on a field trip. And we got this huge van, all air conditioned. And we went, it was a long drive to one of the parks, the national parks. And they had never been in a restaurant either. So I treated them to lunch at this lodge. It was a 5-course meal, blew their minds. And right outside there, there was water holes, and they saw these so many elephants, huge elephants there. And then we went on a ride around there, and they saw giraffes and zebras, and they just, it was just overwhelming for them. They just had a wonderful time, and they could never stop talking about it after that. And together with the lessons, I was showing them about how important elephants are. And the main lesson that I really wanted to show them was that elephants, the leaders in the elephant world of the herds, they are the matriarchs, the strong older mother. And I was tell these girls, you are matriarchs. You will be leaders, just like the elephant, in your community, and you will show people how to take care of nature and animals. And they loved that message. And so we did all kinds of my theater background. I had them doing improv scenes where they would act it out, and they were naturals, and they had a great time. And I was just so happy to see how they responded to this teaching that it inspired me to want to start a school just for them. And it's called the Elephant Matriarch School for Mothers and Children. And this is for all these girls who don't finish their education. And I want them to go back to school, and I want the school to be a credentialed school so they can get their high school diploma and so on. But they will learn, every subject will be based on nature. Mathematics can be based on geography, anything you think of, you can base it on nature and animals. So they will be completely inundated with it. And that's my hope now. If the book could become a bestseller, or if it becomes a film, which I really hope it does, a movie, so many people could see these adventures. That's what my goal, one of my goals, is to make that school.
And now some of your students are pursuing going further with their studies, aren't they?
Yes, I was able to sponsor a couple of the girls to go to college, and the ones who were, there were two who had just barely finished high school. They couldn't even get into the junior college because they had gotten D minuses. And you can't help it if you're getting raped. You just don't think about your studies too much. So they had to go for rehabilitory courses before they could go to college. But they're both on the verge right now of getting their 2-year degree, and they're qualified to teach children. And one of them wants to work with the Wildlife Service. So I'm very encouraging of her to do that. And then there's, yeah, it's really wonderful. I think that I would like them to come back and teach in the Elephant Matriarch School when we get it.
Well, and you've talked also about Kenya Wildlife Service and how um, they're involved in hopefully preventing or at least mitigating human animal conflict. What's that all about?
The Wildlife Service.
Well,
Well,
the ways that, I mean, Kenya seems to me to be a really rapidly growing economy. You've got shopping centers springing up and whatever. Well, you've got all this protected land,
right.
and you will hear about human animal conflict. what forms does that take, and what are they doing about it?
Well, like I said, the worst part is uh, it's farming, really. They want to build, and it's also overpopulation. There's overpopulation in the country and in all of Africa right now. And so people are spreading out where they build homes and homesteads, and they're encroaching on the migratory routes of the animals, that and these routes have been there for hundreds if not thousands of years. So these elephants, they know where to go. They travel, they move around a lot because of the weather, and when it gets dry in one area, they know exactly where to go, and they also know how to dig for water underneath. So all of a sudden, they're going on their route that they've gone on thousands of times before, and here's a farm with fruit. So of course they're going to try to eat the fruit, and then the farmers don't know how to deal with it, so they only take the most drastic measures. But there are mitigating things that they could do, and some of them are starting to do, like for instance, raising bees, putting bees. Elephants are afraid of bees. So if they have beehives on their fences, that scares away the elephants. Now, that's not that hard, but these people are so poor that even, starting up a beehive business or to have several, they don't have the cash, so they need help. I mean, when we talk about people being poor, I mean, the poor people there are poorer than you think here. They're very poor. I mean, even I was really sad to find out that people who even worked with us, we stayed in a nice apartment complex, and it was mostly for tourists, but we had a lease there. So tourists would come and go, but it turns out that the tourists, what was I going to say, Gerald? The the people in the that well the people who worked in the apartments,
People who served you,
yes, people who we got
your
to know, who
staff.
were very friendly with and trusted. I found out that they lived in a one room, no toilet, no stove, no running water, and that was so sad.
And it's become even more challenging during COVID, I would imagine. I believe you've corresponded with, still continue to be in contact with people that you made friends with there and were colleagues
It's very
and
challenging there, because the town we lived is mostly a tourist town. It's a darling little town right on the Indian Ocean, but it's based on tourism. And when during COVID, for example, and different other things that happen, there's no tourists, and these people are starving because that's how they make their money. And it's not like they can just pick up and go somewhere else. Many of the people have never even lived in any place else except that one spot. They've never been to Nairobi, the main city. They've never even seen, like I told you, an elephant, even though they're in this country where people like us, we go thousands and thousands of miles just to see this beautiful animals, and they live a couple hours away and they've never seen them. They can never leave their one spot. It's very sad.
and Nairobi is
And
several hours away from the coast, right?
yes,
And some in some ways not an even if you've got money, not the easiest journey, I would think.
no, there's
But
only one road that goes from Nairobi to the beach, and it's mostly a one lane highway on each direction. So it takes many, many hours to get there. And now they have a train too. They just got a train in there. So that helps
yeah,
some of the
well, of
people
course
who can.
there's the air flights, but you the
The
average
locals don't
Kenyan's
usually
not
take
going to be
the
able to
air.
afford that.
Right, right. Even though for us
Yeah.
it might be not that expensive. I mean, but for them it's impossible almost.
Well, if Americans were going to pick up, and I understand the tourist industry is opening up by degrees, what would you advise people who might be intrigued by what they see on National Geographic or want to undertake a safari, and what might they expect, and what counseling might you give them about their trip?
Well, I would say comparison shop. There's many, many tour companies, you know. But also, if possible, if they're inclined, especially young people, you might want to do some volunteer work over there. They have programs where you can go over, for a couple weeks and you help some project and then you're over there, and then you learn how to get less expensive things once you're there, and you can get to know more indigenous people instead of always being treated. If you go as a first class tourist, which we have done sometimes, because luckily when I've been writing articles about Kenya, some of those articles are also about tourism, and as a reward for writing the article, we get to stay in some of the really top places. And those top places, if you want a first class vacation, Kenya is great. I'm telling you, Kenya does tourism very well. They treat you like a queen, like a king. They'll take you to the nicest places. They'll take care of you. Nothing will happen to you when you go with some of these top grade. But if you do a little research and you find out which ones are helping to support the local efforts to improve the country, and there's many that you could write to some of the organizations like the Big Life Foundation, and the Masai Mara is one of the most beautiful areas, wild areas, and it's run completely by the Masai people. And the Masai people are the ones who have fought the hardest to not kill the wildlife, to keep them. And um, they're mostly pastoral. They still move around, from one area to the other. They have cows. That's the only conflict with them, is that sometimes they want more grazing for the cows and where the wildlife is. So, but in general, they are very respectful of the wildlife, and there's many organizations run by the Maasai people who they have their beautiful campsites and safari programs. I would recommend them, and just read up on a few of them and read some reviews. I don't know all of them, but I've been with several, and almost every one of them was really good, even the lesser expensive ones.
Well, tell us about the safari experience, or the tourist experience. For example, what would be the difference staying in a lodge versus a camp? People might not even be aware there's a difference.
Right. Well, I didn't know, when we first started going there, about the tents, like they say, well, you could stay in a tent. Okay, that sounds pretty rural, right?
Right,
Well,
right.
you'd be amazed at the tents that they have. I mean, they have tents fit for a king. I mean, you go in there and there's a king size bed inside the tent. There's a really nice bathroom with a shower inside the tent or right outside it. I mean, it's great. I think I would recommend staying in a tent. You feel closer at night. You can hear the rhinos, or you can hear the lions. It's kind of exciting. And then, of course, the lodges, we have stayed in a few lodges too, and they were always nice, and the food was good. Their service is excellent. They used to be a British colony, and the old British ideas of service were very high end. The waiters with their little napkins over their arms, and very attentive to you when you go to dinner. I mean, I'm a vegan and I'm gluten free. So they all asked me, and they would accommodate me. And in some of the really nice tents, they actually would. I mean, I met one of my friends there who is a chef in one of the camps, and he created all vegan meals just for me. Very good ones too. Very good.
Well, that certainly sounds like a wonderful experience. So that's going on safari is was your introduction to East Africa, and then, as I understand, you got more and more invested in the experience. Would that be a summary?
Yes, yes. Well, I'll tell you, my
Okay,
very first experience with it was through a dog. I have to say, my
really?
first dog that I got in the 90s, yeah, opened my heart to animals completely. I was an animal lover as a young child, and I had used to get in all different kind of animals, and my mother didn't like it. And when I had a dog, that dog was everything to me. And but she said we couldn't handle it, so it broke my heart. And I after that it broke my heart, so I never even thought about animals for many, many years. And then when I finally did, all that animal love came flooding back. And I just wanted to be with animals and learn about animals and do things for animals. And so when after I got my dog and we had our little dog show that Gerald mentioned, the Georgia and Marcello show, then I also was thinking about I bought that dog. He was a champion. Came from a family of champions. And he was wonderful, but I didn't even know at the time how many dogs are being killed in our shelters because they don't have enough people to adopt them, and how people often, if it becomes inconvenient, they just take their dog to the shelter. And it just really broke my heart. And so I started learning more about how to help animals. And right away, I came across some elephant advocates, and they were trying to get Billy the elephant out of the zoo in Los Angeles because he was doing some head bobbing, which is a psychological thing. And he then other problems that elephants get when they're confined. And a wonderful elephant conservationist named Joyce Poole came to Los Angeles. She worked in Kenya, and she did a talk for us advocates. And I was totally taken away. And after that, I had to go to Kenya. I had to see the elephants. I had to be in the wild. And so that's when it all started. Just going there and learning, and kept learning and meeting more people and finding out what's really going on and being with the wild ones. It just changed my life. And anyway, that's
Well, how does the safari experience go? I mean, how does that happen? You have a truck and a guide. How does your day go if you're on the safari?
well, usually you might use the same safari group to guide your whole trip. Say you're going to be there for 2 weeks, say for example. And so they'll
Okay.
plan everything for you. They'll help you. They'll pick you up at the airport. They'll put you in a hotel that night in Nairobi. And maybe there'll be a day in Nairobi where you go and see the giraffe center. You go to the Sheldrick nursery and see the baby elephants. And then you decide, you helped create your own program. That's why you need to research a little bit. But, say you want to go to the Masai Mara, which I recommend. You might have a couple of options there, and you decide which one, and some of them might be a little more expensive than the other, but you can read about what you get. And then they'll take you there. I mean, it could be usually it's in a small plane. They'll take you to another part of the country. Sometimes it could be in a van. I mean, it depends on your trip. And they'll take you there, and they'll put you in the tent or a lodge, You can decide everything before you go. But I'm just saying, because you probably never stayed in a tent like that before. That's really special. Um, and they'll accommodate you if you have special needs. And then they'll say, okay, you're going to stay there for 2 days, 3 days. Then they'll take you to another area of the country where it's a little different. Maybe you'll go up to Lake Nakuru and you'll see thousands of beautiful flamingos, just gorgeous. And there's every area has special things. It's such a beautiful country, so many animals, and there's just a lot to explore. Or maybe you're somebody who loves lions. Well, there's actually, a lion camp where it's an area where there are a lot of lions. It's also in the Masai Mara, and they know how those drivers they know where the elephants go. I mean, the lions. So they'll take you and you'll see lions, and you'll see lions. Sometimes you'll see them eating other animals, which is, something to see, I guess.
Well, indeed, you
And
you you see how life plays out in
yeah, and the
all its
cheetahs too.
details.
Cheetahs, we saw cheetahs eating a wild buffalo. And it's like that's what life is in the wild. Is it's but then you see the elephants, and the elephants are vegetarians. They don't eat other animals.
So now your safari driver in the safari vehicle is going to pick you up like before dawn, right?
Yes, they pick you up early so you get out there, because that's when you could see a lot of animals. It's early in the morning. That's when they do
Yeah,
their hunting.
feeding time,
Yeah,
morning and evening.
yes,
Uh,
and sometimes
take your
they
nap in
place you
the
there.
afternoon, right? Have a
Well,
nice
they
lunch
have
and
a
take your
pool
nap in the
there. They
afternoon.
have drinks if you want to have drinks, or there's
It is
really
part of
quite a
the
bit.
safari experience, yes.
It's a fabulous, if you can. I mean, it is expensive to go, just to fly there. Expensive. Save your miles. That's what we always do. Save your miles, buy things and get airplane miles. And then at least you get your airfare taken care of. And then once you're there, save your money and do your research, and then pick out what something sounds really good to you, and you'll have a wonderful time in Kenya.
Well, let's shift the topic just a bit because I'm intrigued by um, at first glance, looking at the cover of your book, people might think, okay, charming story for children. And indeed, I think some of your reviews have said that children would enjoy the book. But in fact, you've got quite a few very serious themes about, animal rescue. Both of these dogs were rescued, were they not?
Yes, yes.
Um,
They
And
were
so
both street dogs.
you describe the rescue situation, but also you're contrasting as you discussed how animals are treated there in terms of like how what we would call family pets uh, maybe don't really exist in the same way. But also, I think you you've woven the whole issue of animal rights into your narrative. And I think that for a lot of people, and maybe perhaps many of our viewers, the idea of animals having rights seems kind of strange because, yes, of course, in Kenya, um, animals are treated as livestock, perhaps, or certainly as property. But here in the United States, there are actually some initiatives I think that you have been involved in terms of actually attributing a kind of a personhood to animals, as though animals have not only a life but souls. You want to comment on that a bit?
Yes, I'm a member of the Non-Human Rights Project, and the Non-Human Rights Project is the only organization that's trying to legally change things for animals. And they have an elephant as a client, and they also have had a chimpanzee. And they try to show that the elephant, unfortunately, humans have considered animals to be their property, or they can do whatever they want with them. And so, especially in the world of elephants, let's say, because I'm familiar with those especially. Elephants have been used over the years. They used to use them in wars. They use them for logging. They have to spend their whole life lugging these heavy logs and being enslaved, really. It's like a slavery type of existence. And then even today, there's many places where you could go on elephant rides, and they put people on these elephants' backs, and sometimes with these chairs, and it really hurts their back, and they don't that they're not given consideration for their feelings, like they have pain. They have pain. They miss their families. They're taken away from their families. Um, they're also taken away from their habitats. In the wild, the elephants go hundreds of miles, and and when we get them captured, they're in a small situation. The temple elephants in India, they have to stand in that one spot their whole life, so people can think they're good luck and touch them. And, an elephant's brain, a baby elephant's brain is bigger than a whole human baby. They have a huge brain, and they have helped create our whole world the way we are. They helped create all the forests in the world. They used to exist in every continent on Earth. And we owe them a debt of gratitude. Instead, we take advantage. Oh, how can I make money? How can this help me? How can I have fun with this animal? It's just an animal after all. No, they are other earthlings, just like we are. We're of the earth. We are from the earth, and we go back to the earth when we die, just like them. And just because we have some power, it's not, it's abusive. And I firmly believe that elephants do not belong in circuses or zoos. And luckily, after years of protests, we were able to shut down the Ringling Brothers Circus. And we need to get the elephants out of the zoos. They suffer in zoos. There are elephants in Canada in the ice and cold every winter by themselves in one room. I mean, it's just sad. It's very sad when you see the elephants in the wild and you see how happy they are. Elephants are very kind animals. They love each other. They help each other, and they help other animals. When other animals need water, they dig up water during a drought, and the other animals live. Even their footprint, it's so big that tadpoles and other microorganisms live in the footprint. I mean, they're so much part of the earth and part of what created the earth, and it's just wrong, for us. Anyway, the Non-Human Rights Project believes all that too, and they are fighting to get rights for elephants right now in the courtroom, and they have a case coming up very soon in the New York State Court. This will be the highest court that they've ever gotten to present this to, and so we're hoping that right now they're focusing on Happy. Happy is an Asian elephant who's in the Bronx Zoo, been in there 40 years without another elephant, just alone, enclosed. They would get, and there are a couple of really good sanctuaries that we have in the United States, where elephants who've been in bad situations, they can go there, and they have acres and acres they can explore. They have people that will help them. I mean, they do have medical treatment. Most of them have arthritis because of standing so long. Their pads on their feet get worn out from being on the cement. All the things that are not natural for an elephant. And so the Non-Human Rights Project is trying to change the law so you cannot treat these animals that way.
Terriers in the Jungle, an inspiring and uplifting book, uh, an unexpected uh, delight in terms of experiencing life in East Africa through the life of two wisecracking dogs. Georgia, tell us not only where our viewers could reach out to you, but also find out more about your book and the work that you're doing.
Well, I do have a website, georgiaumano.com, and it's Georgia with a J, Georja, Umano with a U, Umano, .com. And I do have some things on there, and also I have some information about the girls, the school that I want to start, the Elephant Matriarch School.
Elephant
And you
Matriarch
can
School.
get the book, you can get the book on Amazon, and I guess some of the bookstores have it. I don't know exactly which ones, but it's available to them to order.
Well, you've got paperback and Kindle both, right?
Paperback and Kindle, right?
Yeah,
Paperback and
yeah, and then the paperbacks would be on, I think, Barnes and Noble, and some of the other booksellers as well. Kindle
right.
would be Amazon. So thank you, Georgia, for being with us today.
Well,
And
thank you for having me. It
you,
was delightful.
uh, your your work and your mission and your commitment, your passions are no doubt inspirational to our audience. And the idea that that a person could pick up stakes and decide, I want to go someplace and make a difference. I think we could do with a whole lot more of that kind of citizenship of the world. Um, Before we close, I wanted to mention to our viewers, we had discussed with Gary Lindbergh last week about um, human consciousness and metaphysics and some of the bigger questions. And of course, on this show, we often talk about there being more questions than answers. But I wanted to comment on the fact that I recently read Christoph Koch's book, The Feeling of Life Itself. Now, Christoph Koch actually is a scientist, a neuroscientist, and he wrote his book to recap and explain to a more general audience all the research that he was doing on how the brain works and how human consciousness, just the nature of human consciousness and how it works. And one of the things that I found really striking about this book is that he's got a very detailed explanation of how synapses and neurochemicals and electronic signals work in the brain. And then this big question about, all right, if we understand that, could we make a computer that was aware of itself? And surprisingly, right before the end of this book, Koch, who actually owns a dog, he comments and he said, I'm still baffled by this idea of consciousness. I can explain thoughts. I can even explain the show, thinking about thinking. I can think being the observer of someone's thoughts as though a psychologist might look at it. But he said, the only conclusion I can come to yet, and he stressed it's not the final conclusion, but he said, the only conclusion I can come to yet is that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe. Now think about that. Consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe. Almost goes back to what Ernest Holmes used to say, God is all that there is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, when Georgia is talking about dogs and dogs' personalities and consciousness, the old notion we have of animals, the so-called dumb animals, is that they have no souls, they have no consciousness. Well, Koch, this preeminent scientist, saying no, all living things participate in consciousness to the extent that their neurological equipment will permit them to do it. Almost as though, okay, a radio, a tiny radio might be able to receive this much, a bigger computer might be able to receive that much. But this is this is a thought to hold, because it may change. Certainly in reading George's book will give you an introduction as to how in tune she is with how these dogs of hers think, and the idea that this portrayal of canine consciousness is really, really remarkable. And Georgia, you're to be congratulated for this book. I think it really will make a difference.
Thank you. I hope so. I sure do. That's one reason I wanted to become a movie, so it'll be available to even more people.
Coming soon to a theater near you, Terriers in the Jungle. Get the paperback, get the ebook, put it on your phone, tell folks about it. And yeah, Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, look it up. So thank you again, Georgia.
Thank you.